best date, the longest amount of lead time that the electoral board could give us was May 8th for the nomination deadline for parties to put forward their candidates. So that was 14 days notice that we had by the electoral board from the time that they set that date to when May 8th will happen. So which is this Friday, 14 days. So under normal circumstances, 14 days is hard. But we would typically do an in-person caucus in order to get our nominee together, and we would have that open to the county. That is our preference by far, and remains so. But in a situation where we're dealing with a global pandemic, where the governor has ordered us all to stay home, we could not hold an in-person caucus consistent with that stay-at-home order. We couldn't do it consistent with the level of public safety that's needed and that we want to demonstrate here because it's so woefully lacking at the national level. We could not do the in-person caucus. We also looked at how else we might be able to do a large-scale nomination process where we couldn't run people through a school hours on end. We did not have the personal protective equipment necessary to run a drive-through caucus, which was something we absolutely looked at. There were also issues with how we would handle traffic and how we would verify the voter registration of folks seeking to vote while outside, possibly in the rain. But ultimately, the decision that we could not do drive-through came down to the fact that we could not protect our volunteers with the personal protective equipment to a sufficient level that I was comfortable sending people out there. I will not endanger folks' lives for this. That is just where we draw the line. We see that Republican leadership will not draw the line there. We have to protect folks in this difficult period. We looked at vote by mail, but our current experience with the school board caucus indicates you can't do vote by mail at all in 14 days. Finally, we looked at online voting, and we continue to look at online voting. We could not get it done in 14 days. But if we face this experience again, we are researching how we might better respond if there is a vendor out there that could help us with online voting. But to pull something together from scratch for 14 days to cover 240,000 people in a county, we could not get it done with the resources of the party, which is not the state government. So that was the conclusion that we reached, which was done with a great deal of deliberation, that an open caucus would almost certainly fail and almost certainly would endanger the health of Arlingtonians. So because we could not do that, we decided that the only practical option was to do a closed caucus that was limited to the members of the steering and county committees that could be conducted online. And that caucus concluded just as this meeting began at 7:00. For those of you who participated in that, some of you had a very smooth experience, some of you did not, which I think further demonstrated how challenging it was in order to put together an online vote in that short a period of time, even for the number of people that we had for the closed caucus. Despite the limitations of that nomination period, I am delighted that we had 4 outstanding candidates run for the nomination. They were very impressive. I hope you caught the candidate forum that was put together on Sunday by the Arlington Young Democrats, for which we're very grateful. They did a terrific job. But we had to proceed with the closed caucus so that we could have one of those terrific candidates as the Democratic nominee. But I do want to emphasize that when we put together the closed caucus, we expressly envisioned transforming it into an open process if we could get an extension of the absurd special election timeline that we were saddled with by Virginia law. That was in the caucus documents themselves. The rules themselves called for the transformation if we could get that extension. So what did we do to try to obtain the extension? Folks, I can tell you the team has killed themselves over the past couple of weeks trying to get this done. We began immediately with a public petition advocating for an extension of the special election timeline. Nearly 1,000 of you signed it. We agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why we started the petition. We wanted an open process. We issued an open letter to Commonwealth leaders, which we paid for in the Sun Gazette, making clear our desire to please extend the timeline of the special election. Let all Arlington Democrats vote. On April 30th, the Arlington County Board heard our cry. They unanimously approved a petition to the Virginia Supreme Court asking for an extension of the special election timeline. Thank your county board members for fighting for your voting rights. I certainly did. The next day, the Arlington Democrats filed its own letter of support for an extension of the special election timeline with the Virginia Supreme Court, something that I never thought I would do, but was happy to do to fight for the Arlington voting rights. That same day, our Virginia delegation, the Arlington delegation to the Virginia General Assembly, issued its own statement of support for an extension of the special election timeline. Folks, we were out there talking to whoever we could, and I make no apologies for that. We were asking for the 60 days that we needed to vote by mail because I wanted every Arlington Democrat to participate in this nomination process if we could get them there. And on May 4th, we asked our electoral board to be on standby, that if the Virginia Supreme Court came through with an extension of the special election deadline, that they would move that nomination deadline so that we could have an open process. Unfortunately, the Virginia Supreme Court did not come through for us today. They rejected Arlington's petition. We were unable to transform the process into an open one that we wanted. You can check out every document that I have just cited on our special election webpage, which is at the bottom of this slide. But I am sincere to you tonight that we pulled out all the stops to try to make this as open a process as possible. So please check out those documents. So what happens now? Our caucus just concluded. You're not going to hear the results here. I'm not breaking any news here on that topic, for the very good reason that counting votes is something that needs to happen with just a great deal of care and caution to make sure it's done properly. And so the tech team is working right now to pull the data in and get it into shape so that it can be counted. We do expect to issue the results of the nomination process tomorrow. Whoever wins that process, whichever of those 4 terrific candidates comes out successful, will receive the full support of the Arlington Democrats. Our entire organizing might will be brought to bear to ensure their victory on July 7th. We take nothing for granted here, and I hope that every one of you will join me in fighting to get them over the finish line on July 7th. By Friday, we will know if there are going to be Republican or independent candidates, and news reports suggest that, yes, we'll have at least one independent candidate. So that we will have a fight on our hands, and it is a fight that we intend to win. I also want to note that the members of the General Assembly from Arlington have committed to me that they are going to look very seriously at putting forward legislation to fix the terrible special election provisions in the Virginia Code that led us into this situation during a global pandemic. No one wanted this situation. We have done the absolute best we could, and I am grateful to the General Assembly delegation for doing the absolute best that they can to help to prevent this from ever happening again. So that is what happened with the county board nomination process. I wanted to be very clear with everybody about that because it's been a dramatic few weeks. I am very grateful, as I said at the top, to the team that worked on these, on the caucus, as well as our many contingency plans that would have been implemented if we had any level of extension. We were looking at what could we possibly do. So I'm grateful to the team for pulling that together. That's the county board nomination.